Hello again, and welcome from the Maniac Guy up here in Maine. It's a cold and rainy day out there, so into the workshop we go, and I'm just going to put a quick video together today on how to properly mount torque down to specs and balance out a scope on your rifle. So this is a 22LR project with the FVSR that I've got by Savage, and I'll just kind of take you guys through my method step by step. So, all right, stay tuned, and we'll get right to it. Okay, so the first step in the process is going to be we're going to have to mount the rail, which I've already done that part, the rail to the actual receiver, and the bottom part. This is just your run-of-the-mill. I think these are some Simmons or something, really inexpensive scope rings, and you're going to want to mount those to the rail. So to make sure that we have everything torqued to spec, because it's not good if you've got something that's tighter in one place than another, it just kind of shifts accuracy. So there again, we're talking about doing this thing righteous and by the numbers, so that when you get pushing out with this scope that we've got here, this is one of the Nikon spot on, one of the pro staffs that use bullet drop compensation. So when you really start pushing rounds out there, I noticed that with my 300 Win Mag, when I got that out beyond 350, 400 yards, I started getting, hitting off center. And even though, everything was lined up good and it was sighted in pretty good at 100, and it's because everything needs to be lined up right when you're mounting it torqued correctly. So that's what we're doing here. There are ways to lap it and all that stuff, to use lapping compound on the inside of your rings. And we're not going to get into all that today. This is just a really good solid way for your average shooter with your average stuff to get this thing done and get it done right. So what we have here is a Wheeler Engineering fat wrench, and it measures in inch pounds. And so you've got all the different bits and everything like that. Now you'll notice these guys here, that's your standard, it's any standard 3/8 inch drive, but this fat wrench by Wheeler Engineering actually came with a driver bit and a socket that, fits all these, every one that I've come across anyway, for the scope mounts. So what we're going to do now is we're going to torque these guys here on, and those are going to want to, you can, almost all rings come from the manufacturer shipped with torque specs, what they would expect for that ring, and you can find that most of that online. But as a good rule of thumb, whenever your rail is going to your receiver, so we're talking about these guys down in here. These are old scope rings I've had around, by the way. So these guys down in here, you're talking about roughly, well, what I always adjust those down to is 25 inch pounds. So the rail going in the receiver is 25 inch pounds. Your ring to your rail, where you're tightening down here, that's also going to be 25 inch pounds. So I am going to just kind of do this video in increments, let you guys know what I'm doing, but rather than wasting all the time of actually filming me torquing it, I'll just let you know what I'm doing, and we'll fade out, and then we'll go to the next step. Okay, so that's all torqued up to specs. So we've got that down to 25 inch pounds. And in case any of you guys don't know what this looks like, so when you're using this, you'll feel a definitive, pardon the camera here, definitive click like that when it gets to the correct poundage. So when you're doing it, always be sure, this is kind of the caveat, always be sure that you put even pressure between the two. So you're coming down on this one a little bit, then this one a little bit, then this one a little bit, kind of back and forth. You'll feel it snugging and snugging until you feel that very definitive click. And then you're ready to go back to this one and click, or vice versa. And of course, we've always verified, you see the red in there, we're always checking to make sure that these weapons are safe and that there's nothing in them before we start our projects. So, all right, onwards and upwards. Okay, so the next step in this process, you're going to want a way to secure the rifle down, and to do it in such a way so you're not going to damage the weapon, and it's going to be perfectly secure, so it's not going to move once you level it. I use the Tipton Best Gun Vise. This thing is good for, depending on the adapters you use, handguns, ARs, all different kind of rifles. And so this just works really good for me. And then how we're going to level everything out, this is actually the Wheeler Engineering. It's the professional level system. And I'll show you guys how that works here in a minute as we go. So I have used the level system. I have it there in my kind of junk drawer of all my spare parts and things. And in my estimation, it doesn't work anywhere near as good as this professional leveling system. For the main reason, you stick one of the levels in the chamber and it tips, and I always had a hard time getting very precise with it. This one costs a little bit more, but definitely worth it in my estimation. Reluctant to put a price point out on it just because you can find these things. It's the Wheeler Engineering Professional Level System. You can search it up on Amazon. I think I ended up buying this one on Midway USA, the Midway website. So, Brownells, Midway, Amazon, these are very common things to find, the fat wrench and the professional leveling system. So, all right, and I will show you guys how that works here in a minute. So, all right, let's get the rifle all hooked up on the vise here. Okay, now we have taken the small level. We've got the gun, and we've placed the firearm in the vise and kind of locked down these sides. And if anybody needs, I can always put out another tutorial. Just comment if you'd like to see it on how to use this vise. But it's fairly, honestly, it's fairly intuitive when you use it. So now what I've done is I've taken the smaller one of these bubble levels, and you look for any even spots on the firearm. Now here you've got the rail. You can see that's balanced there. And the rings that we just attached, which are straight and true because we torqued them down to specs and we made sure everything was lined up. Those are also balanced. So now we're going to take this guy and we're going to clamp him on the end of our barrel or somewhere on our barrel, and that's going to be the level that we go off from moving forward. And the firearm is very sturdy in this vise, so it's not going to move around on us a lot. So all right, let's go ahead and get that other level clamped on there. Okay, so now we've got this guy here is all leveled up still, and then you come down here and this guy's leveled up. Now basically you just rock this, this opens up in almost like a clamp. You clamp it onto the barrel, snug it down. Then this is a micro adjustment knob if things seem to be a little off. So now you know where that level matches that level. We can take this one off now. Sorry, a little hard doing this, holding the camera, holding my phone, trying to video this for you guys. So now we've got that one off. Now that's going to be the level that we're going from here on out. This guy is going to come back into play when we put the scope on the firearm. Okay, so we actually left the rings. We put those rings on, but left them loose enough so that we can still move the scope from side to side. So now what we need to do is balance this. So as you can see, I'm trying to get my own light here, the bubble level there is balanced, leveled right out. It's sitting on the flat scope base. And this one is still good to go. Now I actually had to pull this whole works off from the vise so that I could adjust my eye relief to the scope, because you want to be sure that the scope has got the correct eye relief for you so that you don't get everything all trued up and just how it wants to be, and then you go to shoulder the rifle and, oh crap, I can't even see through the objective lens. So because we've got this level and this level is now true and it's on there, all I had to do when I put the gun back in the vise was kind of make that centered again. And now everything is all right. Everything is all true. That's good to go. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to use this guy, which is just a standard run-of-the-mill DAC Industries. It's using the same bit as I'm using on this, or you could use an Allen wrench or whatever you've got to kind of tighten these down just to snug them up. And then when I'm done with that, and I apologize guys, it's getting blurry and unblurry and not knowing what to focus on, but when we're done with just snugging those up just a little bit, then we're going to take the fat wrench. And by the way, whoops, it's a good thing those are rugged. By the way, what you do is you take and you just pull this bottom out, and you can thread up or down. And that makes your inch pounds on here. This is measuring inch pounds for you. So that's how you adjust your torque. And fat wrench, by the way, stands for firearms accurizing tactical wrench. So, anyway, it's basically a torque wrench that goes in inch pounds. instead of foot-pounds, like a kind of a standard torque wrench. So yes, and like I say, 25 inch-pounds is what's normal for the average rifle. I'm actually probably going to dump this down to like 20 inch-pounds, just because this is only a 22 that I'm doing here, so it's not going to have a lot of recoil on it. But it's really, you know, it's up to the individual user, and just go by what your product specs say. But so that's what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and torque this down to where we want it. The important thing is that by doing this, you're putting the same amount of pressure on all your screws, on all your parts, even your average pillar bedding on your average rifle. For your action screw, which is like, I've got my finger on this one right here, that's typically right around 45 inch-pounds. But again, I would encourage you to see what you can't find for your specific rifle on your manufacturer's website, to see what you can find on that. Because that does vary sometimes from firearm to firearm and bedding type to bedding type. I mean, sometimes you get into these like Badger ordinances and stuff with like a solid aluminum, or like my Remington 700 long range. It's got a solid aluminum chassis, like a Macmillan kind of stock on it. And now you're talking about, you know, sometimes in the hundreds of inch-pounds, just depending. So, all right. Moral of the story, check your manufacturer specs. So now to torque these guys down. Okay, so now here we are. We've got this guy all lined up. And we've got this guy all lined up. And they're all torqued down. Got a right around 20 inch-pounds on here. And as you can see, they're all four going to be right where we want them. And as I was saying, I do the same thing with these guys, where I'll go, here, I'll just set this down. I'll go and I'll hit, you know, I'll hit this guy, and then I'll come around and I'll hit this guy, and then I'll come around and hit this guy and this guy. So almost like an X pattern, just because I'm trying to put an even amount of pressure as I'm tightening these down, so that we end up not overstressing one area over another. And I mean, that's kind of the point of this whole thing. So really, as of right now, this scope is now all torqued down to specifications, and it's all leveled out. I'm just going to take a spare second and now level this level, because I like to use those because it's kind of the same thing. You know, if you've got your bipod folded out and you're sitting on a rock and your gun is tilted like so, and maybe you don't know it is, then you know, you're going to end up, you know, when you get out there and you're pushing it, like I think the scope will actually bring a little 22 LR. I mean, yeah, it's you're having to put quite a bit of trajectory into it, but you know, it's kind of lobbing it in like an artillery piece, but it'll bring it out to 150 yards. I want to say. I mean, I'd have to Nikon spot on kind of thing. But bottom line is, it's going to throw all that out at range, because a bullet doesn't go in a straight line, is the reason why we do this whole thing. You know, a bullet actually goes in like an arc. And so when you're shooting a bullet straight in, it's not making a laser straight shot onto the target. What you're doing is you're actually arcing it up and into the target. And your line of sight, which would be straight, it intersects with that at a couple of different points, you know, like when you first shoot, and then it goes up, and then it's going to come back down, and it's going to meet that point again. And so the reality is, if you're canted to the right when you pull that trigger, or canted to the left when you pull that trigger, guess what's going to happen when you get down range? If you're shooting at range and you're really pushing your round to where you know, you're doing some long range kind of stuff, if you're shooting at range, you're not going to go straight into that target. You're going to be, if you're tilted to the right, whether it's because your scope is torqued a little bit and it's not even visible to the naked eye, but it is, or whether it be that you're resting on a stump and your whole rig is kind of tilted to the right, guess what? You're going high right, because it's lobbing it in. So now you're going to be shooting right at the target, even though you're aiming dead at it, or you think you are, it looks like you are, and you don't understand why. And so that's why it's important to level things out. So I'm just going to adjust this so that it matches these guys, but that's why it's also important to put the right torque specs on your scope, and to go ahead and level it out when you do it. So that's what I do. Now the next step in getting this sucker out and actually putting some bang down range is going to be bore sighting it. And then I'll also show you guys how to do a one-shot zero. Technically two shots, but one shot to get you zeroed. So, all right, we'll leave that for another video. That's just the video on how I mount these and torque them down to specs and level them out. So it is a very important step. And yeah, a lot of places say, hey, you buy your scope here, you buy your gun here, we'll go ahead and we'll bore sight it for you. I guarantee you, most of them, the extent of what you're going to get there is going to be they're going to slap a bore sighter on the end, like I'll show you guys in the next video, and that's going to semi-level the scope, and they're going to call it good. Because the very first time I figured out I had a problem, I was out and actually really trying to push my rifle out, and like I said, I got out there, think, if memory serves, it was years ago now, but I want to say 400 or 500 yards. And I started noticing I was hitting high right. And then I did my homework, came back, started doing this, torqued everything down to specs, got everything all set. And now she's tack driver. So this is a 300 Win Mag. I'm pushing out there as far as I possibly can. But so, all right, guys. Again, there's different kinds of rings out there. There's different methods to doing this, but this is the nuts and bolts of how you torque a scope down to specs, and they all have the specs listed. And this is also the nuts and bolts of how you balance the scope out or level a scope out when you do it. So again, your basic rule of thumb is the top ring to the bottom ring. You can do between 20 and 25 inch-pounds depending on what you're doing. Maybe stick with 20 just to make sure you don't strip any of these screws out if you're using an aluminum mount. Again, all this changes if you're using steel or any of that, but for your cheap, hey, I went to Walmart and I bought some cheap mounts, bought some cheap rings. 20 inch-pounds is pretty safe. Your action screws are usually right in the 45 inch-pounds vicinity. Your ring to your rail, these guys down here, is usually right around 25 inch-pounds, and your rail to your receiver is usually right around 25 inch-pounds. So that's also if you have like the kind of deal that's not a full rail. I like the full rail just because it gives you more rigidity. But if you've got just like the Weaver style where you just got two bricks or whatever, that's going to be the same. So that's right around 25 inch-pounds. Super important stuff, guys. If you aren't doing that, then I guarantee you it'll put meat on the table. But if you want to do any accurate shooting at range, you're not getting the accuracy out of rifle that you can. And if you do get a firearms accurizing tactical wrench, if you get the fat wrench, or if you get, they also sell some kind of that are like T-handles that you can just, each one is set to a different torque spec. The reason why I like this one is because, as you can see, you can go, come on, focus in for me, baby. You can go all the way from like 0 to what? That's right around 65 or 70 inch-pounds. I've never actually done anything that heavy, but it gives you a lot more flexibility in one tool. And they're not that much. I want to say 40, 50 bucks, something like that. Yeah, I mean, they might be a little bit more than that, but it's right in there. So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for watching. And again, tune in if you're interested in how to bore sight and get a one-shot zero in on your rifle. So I am going to go in. I got a football game that's going to be starting here in a few minutes. I'm from Maine, so I'm watching the Patriots. So please don't hate on me for that, guys. I just got to show some hometown loyalty. So, all right. Well, take care, guys. And again, thanks for joining. And until next time, have a good one. Bye now.